Hello everybody, Bob Garino here, also known as Reggie Van Gearshift in earlier times. Welcome to my latest broadcast. This particular topic today is on the Ferrari 288 GTO. The 288 GTO was the successor to the 250 GTO, which is world famous, world renowned, actually one of which I drove back in the 1980s. This 288 GTO is a very different car. I was a Ferrari dealer in Cohasset, Massachusetts, a small village about 25 miles south of Boston, with a partner, Fritz Muehlhaupt. The company name was Auto House. We started in 1967. Ferrari is one of the franchises we started with, along with Porsche, BMW, eventually Alfa Romeo and Rover. Quite an interesting line of cars and a very interesting time dealing with these different machines. And Ferrari certainly was the most interesting. So just a little history on Ferrari importation. Originally, the Ferraris all came through Luigi Canetti in Greenwich, Connecticut. Canetti was a friend of Ferrari's, a personal friend. He had raced cars with in Europe, some very successfully, and he was the distributor up until 1972, when the company merged with Al Garthwaite, whose company was Algar in Philadelphia and Paoli, Pennsylvania. The company became Canetti Garthwaite, and they handled the importation of the cars up until 1979, when the Ferrari factory, Ferrari SPA, actually took over the importation. This happened to most of the major manufacturers that originally came in through smaller distributors. The factories wanted to take over. They wanted to control it. In 1979, they had their first dealer meeting up in Montreal at the racetrack, at the Formula One. We met Jody Scheckter and Gilles Villeneuve. And this was a portent of things to come with Ferrari, just incredible dealer meetings that they would have pretty much every 2 years. The next dealer meeting was in Italy. We found out that's where they were going to have the Piero Ferrari actually went around Fiorano with him. That was quite an event, Ferrari and a Ferrari with me. They would tell us about their plans for the U.S. Remember, Ferrari had been missing from the U.S. for a number of years because they couldn't federalize the cars. They were still having difficulty meeting all the federal requirements, so a lot of the 12 cylinders weren't coming in at that time. But in 1984, the dealer meeting, we went to Maranello again, and we were introduced to the Testarossa, which became famous, of course. That was the first 12-cylinder that actually had since the 512 BB in the late 70s. We also went, on that trip, we went to the Scaglietti, Carrozzeria in Modena, and saw them working on the 288 GTO. Well, we had heard rumors that this car was going to be produced, but here we actually saw the production of the car. They were using Kevlar on the hood and the rear lid. It was to be quite an interesting car. And they told us at the dealer meeting that each dealer was going to get one car. So worldwide, 200 and something dealers, they produced 272 cars. None of them were going to be federalized, at least for the U.S. We couldn't really sell them until we modified them, both EPA and DOT standards. So we had a customer that was interested in the car. We had to sell it. They had to sell it to a customer. They couldn't sell it to the dealer. This fellow, good customer of ours, and we made the arrangements to go get the car. It was this was 1985. It was actually December of 1985. We had one of the very last 288 GTOs. We were a fairly small dealer, but a very old dealer. I mean, the dealership was the relationship with Ferrari was pretty old. So we went to Maranello in early December to get the car. Well, it was a very foggy night, and fog in that part of Italy is really infamous. You can't see anything. The European cars, as you may know, have rear fog lights, not only front fog lights, so you can be seen in these really treacherous situations. Anyway, we went there, met Emilio Godoni. He was my contact there. We did some paperwork, and then we went to this garage, which I hadn't seen before. It was just a single-door garage just behind the brick wall where the Ferrari factory is, the entrance. So we opened the door, and inside is the 288 GTO. Red, of course, Rosso Corsa with black. We had ordered it with air conditioning and electric windows. Interestingly, electric windows were lighter than wind-up windows, so that's usually what they raced with. And this car was designed to compete in Group B sports racing, but that never happens because that group got disbanded. So Ferrari only made 272 cars. So we go inside the garage. There's like 4 or 5 Ferrari mechanics, technicians, all dressed in the Ferrari jumpsuits, of course, all grinning broadly that we're there to get this car. So Jack's car, he gets in the driver's seat. We do all the niceties and thank yous and such. Jack starts the car, vroom, and he goes to put it in reverse gear. Silence. I said, Jack, I don't know what's wrong. Tries it again. I said, what's the matter? He says, it won't go in reverse. I said, of course it will. He tries once more. Well, Goldoni very nicely comes over and says, and perhaps we should try and we can get the car out of here for you. So we both get out of the car, and his head technician gets in, starts the car. It's not going in reverse. So Goldoni says, we'll take a look at this, don't worry. And so we left this garage, the door goes down. So we're standing out there with Goldoni waiting for whatever's going to happen. We don't know, but this is, Ferrari. And all of a sudden there's this screecher brakes out on the main road, and we look over and we see this Vespa with a rider doing this arc through the air, like 15 feet above the ground, and you hear this boom. And Goldoni says, don't worry, this happens all the time here with this fog, and apparently it did, but we were concerned about the driver, and we went over, and he was fine. The Vespa was a little damaged. So shortly thereafter, the door opens up again, and out backs the 288 GTO. Well, hopefully you know what they sound like. So we get in the car, and we say goodbye to Goldoni. Well, we have to bring the car back because he's going to ship it for us. So we're just going down the road a little bit. Actually, you can't go down the road at all because it's so foggy. But we take it out, Jack's driving, and we go for maybe half a mile. He says, I can't do this. He says, you have to drive. So I did. So I got in the car. But it was useless. You just couldn't do anything. So we take it back to the factory, and Goldoni says, why don't you come back tomorrow morning? You can take it. It's supposed to be a beautiful day. And so we did. We went back the following morning, and I was driving it, and there's a road, kind of a busy road outside the factory. We wanted to get off that. We get onto the autostrada, and that's where the car just opened up. It was like sublime. It was almost like that scene, if you've ever seen Back to the Future, where the DeLorean suddenly gets this incredible surge of power. It goes into some different time zone. Well, that's sort of what this felt like. So we get down the autostrada, and there's some Porsche 911 that decides it wants to pass us. Well, that didn't happen. So we go down about, 10 or 15 miles, and Goldoni had said there's a side road that goes through the fields and past the farmers and such. And we took that on the way back. It was just a wonderful, wonderful experience, a wonderful car. We get back to the factory and said the thank yous, and Goldoni says, you'll have it very soon. They were shipping it back for us. Well, about 2 weeks later, I have a call from our agent, our import agent in Boston, Brian Hill. He says, Bob, there's a car here for you. I said, what? It was the 288 GTO. That's the factory. They forgot to tell us that they had shipped it. And there it was. I went into Logan to get it myself. The transport company we used wasn't available, and this is a Friday before a long weekend. I said, I better go in there. So I went in, got the car through customs, and headed south to Cohasset on the the Boston Expressway. Well, Boston traffic is bad at good times. Well, and not only was it Friday afternoon, it started to snow, and that was something you loved about New England. But eventually I made it to the dealership, and everybody was waiting for the car to come in. There was a big round of applause, and Fritz didn't want to drive it right away. It was actually a week or so before we drove it. I drove it again. Fritz didn't want to drive it, he just wanted to ride it. He does drive it, of course, eventually. So we had the car. We were not going to sell it. And we were going to get it federalized, get the EPA and the DOT We're going to have the work done by Dick Fritz, a good friend of ours, had a Merispec, a company in Connecticut. He had done cars for us before, 512 BBs, 400Is, really knew what he was doing. And eventually that happened. It took a while, maybe 6 months. And the car didn't look any different, certainly didn't go any differently, but it had all the correct paperwork with it now. It had been federalized. So as I said, we decided to keep the car. And people, it was an attraction in the showroom. Certainly we had lots of people come and look at it. Once in a while, Fritz would take it out and drive it, sort of clean it up. Once in a while I did, for our very good customers that were interested in the car. We had the car maybe 6 or 7 years, and then we decided maybe we should sell it. The car value had gone increasingly up from when we first got it. We had to get special insurance policies for it, what they call a stated value policy, what the car was really worth. It was worth $200,000, then it was worth $400,000. All these insurance policies were coming through Lloyd's of London, and those were arranged through a friend of mine, Suzanne, who worked for Johnson & Higgins, a big insurance company in Boston. Eventually we had the car insured for $1 million. But that was really kind of silly. We had heard stories that they were selling for that, but we wanted to be protected. Eventually we decided we were going to sell the car. And so we advertised it in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and we had a call from a local cardiologist, worked at Mass General, who was very interested in the car. Came down and looked at it, didn't even want to drive it, just wanted to see it, hear it maybe. And we made the arrangements. Well, a lot of these things were not easy sales. He had property he wanted to transfer to us. Eventually, we got all the details worked out, and he took the car. I delivered it up to him myself in the North Shore. He was thrilled. He had a red Bentley too, so he had a really interesting garage. What happened to the car after him, we're not sure. We did see it for sale through a dealer in Boston a few years later. I knew it was the same car because of the serial number, of course. And after that, I lost track of the car. But it was just one of the fascinating cars we had, one of the fascinating stories, I think, to relay to you. And there's more. So, some of them are in my book, Let Me Sell You a Ferrari, published a couple of years ago by McFarlane and Company. And some of them are not in the book, and that's why I had this series of broadcasts, just to fill in the blanks, so to speak. Thank you for listening. There's a lot more stories coming up. You can visit the website, ferraritales.com, see some of the other pictures, some of the cars I drove, and some of the excitement that still goes on with Ferraris in everybody's life. So see you next time.